All right, everybody, it is 5:30 on the dot. Once again, thank you so much for coming out tonight. We know you couldn't be anywhere else, but you're with us this evening, and we're super stoked to see all these faces. It's a really important forum tonight. Thank you so much for coming out. Quick board introductions. This is Old Farm District Neighborhood Association. My name is Jen Sawyer. I do social media right there. This fancy man right here in the middle, that's Brian. Over here, the Mistress of the Food Table, that's Karen. And then our tech guy is Ross. James couldn't be here tonight, but he says hello, sends his greetings. I want to take a moment really quick to stop for the neighborhood associations. There are 13 neighborhood associations, or now neighborhood districts in the UGB of Bend. And it's a really important tool for everybody in the community to use your voice and also become educated on how local issues work and how to give input that matters. So if you have a moment, if you are on Facebook, if you could go to our Facebook page, it's Old Farm District Neighborhood Association, like and follow the page. We also have a YouTube channel. We will be live streaming this tonight and we will be recording it. And so this meeting will be available at a later date on our YouTube channel. Once again, that's Old Farm District Neighborhood Association. I do postings on Nextdoor under Jen Sawyer. So if you see that come across, if you can like the page or like the post and then comment on the post, it helps boost the conversation up in the algorithm. So again, super important for people to get involved locally like this. We need a lot of voices to come to the table. With that being said, we have 2 board positions open. So if you are interested in becoming a board member, please reach out to us. We'd love to have you on board right here. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Brian. Yeah.
I was just saying, put my clipboard down somewhere, I don't know where that is. So, it's here in the room somewhere. So I've covered most of the basic points. Thank you all for being here. We think this is the first big public forum on the wildfire issues, and you will be seeing, hey, look at that here. To see if there's any notes I made for myself, probably lost. I think this is just our key points tonight. Is that the Old Farm District is putting this meeting together, but we're also working with Southeast Bend Neighborhood Association and also in cahoots with Larkspur. We felt that the issue of wildfire is too big. It's everybody. It's the whole city. We saw what happened in Southern California, so we know we're not immune from that. So we need to work together. We want to get this information out. It kind of forces it into the conversation, and you're going to see and hear several more fire type meetings in the next few weeks. So this kind of kicks it off. I think your input is super important. We've got questions that have been submitted to us in advance. We're going to ask the whole questions, except for Tim, who is with the Deschutes County Department of Solid Waste. That's a non-fire related issue. We're going to have all the fire related questions at the end, and that will allow each of the speakers to get through their segment. And so if you would kindly allow us to stay on our clock, Jen's going to be very, you'll hear her giving people reminders. She just gave me the, probably 1 minute warning, so I got to get out of here. And I'm going to turn it over real quick to Tim Brownell as director of the Deschutes County Department of Solid Waste, who's going to talk to us about issues related to his department. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Tim Brownell, Director of Solid Waste for Deschutes County. I think I'll kick off the meeting with something that is fire related, which is we have our fire-free event, so the free disposal of yard debris, woody waste. That is this year from May 2nd through May 11th here at Not So anybody who wants to fill up your car, your pickup truck, what have you, we're open from 7 till 4:30 every day, Monday through Sunday, and free disposal for yard debris. I think they're also going to be giving out free compost during that period as well. So if you want to pick up some compost, I'm getting a little overwhelmed with the amount of work people are doing making compost. We have a lot to give away. Come on by. So I wanted to update you on a few different things. First being on our current search for a new landfill here in Deschutes County. Secondly, I'll talk a little bit about what's going to be happening at our site once that facility, the landfill there is closed. And then a little bit more on what we're doing around litter collection and some expanded efforts to this. So to start, so our landfill, not landfill, is projected to be at full capacity. Right now, we're estimating it to be in the spring of 2031. So about 6 years from now, we should have that entire facility filled up. So we've been in the process of looking for a new home, a new place for refuse to be disposed of. I was here last year and we talked a bit about what that process looked like. From, basically, we're looking for a parcel of land about 500 acres in size, 250 acres, which would be for disposal, and the rest for some of the sport facilities around it. We had narrowed it down to one site on the east side of the Badlands, but we were not able to ultimately negotiate a purchase agreement on that piece of property. So the week after next, we're reconvening our solid waste advisory committee to take a look at a second facility that had been runner-up, and whether that committee would want to recommend that site, or if they want to reopen and look at a couple other sites in which the conditions that previously precluded them from consideration. In particular, landowners did not want to sell. They have come to the county and said they are not interested in doing so. So we may take one site and move that forward, or the committee may ask us to look at a couple other options. The one remaining site that we currently have is it's a very good site near Pine Mountain, but it's pristine land. It's on the edge of the Forest Sage-Grouse area, so there would be some environmental challenges to site there. So we are going to potentially be looking at another one or two sites to see if the community wants to. So then what happens in not landfill when the landfill is closed? And people are wondering, is are we going to close up everything down there? And really the only thing we're going to be closing is the landfill. The transfer station where people bring their waste will still be in operation, will then be loading on transfer trailers and shipping materials out to the landfill. We're not going to, most likely a new landfill will be to the east of town, in the Horse Ridge area or a little farther out. It's too far for people from both road haulers as well as individuals to haul waste. We have a transfer station here at this property, so for the public, they will look and feel the same. However, we won't have a landfill there. We are looking at what we're going to do with that landfill property once it's completely full and we've closed the whole process of finishing up a site once we finish filling it, and it's covered with geomembrane, so water can't get into it. A lot of dirt, 4 or 5 feet dirt on top of it. We'll never build there. We'll never grow trees on it. We don't want root systems to go down into space. So it will be some passive use. We are currently doing a feasibility study as to whether solar panels might be an option there. It doesn't look like that will be financially feasible to do. So it will probably be some form of walking area, parkland, education center, what have you, maybe goat farm. We probably will have a public process within the next 2 years or so to start to envision what it would look like. We had been originally working with Ben Park Directors to that potentially be a site that they might want to use, but subsequently they thought the land just to the south, is what's called Rose property, about 500 acres, that they're going to be developing over the next 20 years into significantly public access parks and public use areas. So our land is probably potentially going to be a pathway to that, an access way to get there instead of have to go down to, if you're on a bike, to walk in instead of going down to 57, if you want to create access ways for our property. So to be continued, you'll hear more about that and probably be able to participate if interested. The other thing you'll probably see over this next year is the big blue flare that you see burning there at night, if you drive by at night. We're in the process of putting in a conversion facility. That flare is the landfill gas burning off. It's methane that's created in the process of decomposition in the landfill without air. So we have to burn that off. We have to destroy it or destruct it. It's a climate impacting gas. So we're regulated to capture and destroy it in some form. We're in the process of putting in a gas converting facility where we will take that gas, have it cleaned up so that it is then natural gas quality. It'll actually go into the substation that feeds the natural gas into the bend system. So it'll go into your storage or everything else. It basically gets cleaned back to a natural gas standard. So that actually will generate revenue for the county as opposed to being an expense. And a beautiful blue light disappear. That should probably happen. You'll see that go out into your horizon within the next years. The other things we're doing on the site is we are looking at developing other recovery facilities. So about 40% of the materials that go into our landfill are generated through the construction and demolition processes. All the building that's going on, we've seen a huge amount of construction waste. A lot of that is wood, clean gypsum board, metal, wires, cardboard, roofing materials. We're looking to build a facility that can actually do significant recovery, separation and recovery of those materials. And then instead of burying them, put them back into the system or burning wood to be made back into lumber products, biomass, into mulch products, covered metals. We think that with the development of that facility, we can increase our recovery from currently about 28% of the materials generated in the county are recycled and composted. With new facilities that we want to put in place, we believe that we'll get over 50 to 55% diversion or recovery here in the county, which is one of the state goals of our science. The other thing that you'll start to see out at the landfill, and this will start by July of this year and definitely be in full place by January or February, is there was a new legislation that went into effect called the Recycling Modernization Act. And it's an act that has producers of packaging and products have to now start to participate. And by participate, I mean they have to start putting money into the programs. Because currently all waste and recycling activities are paid for by you, by your rates, garbage, fees, and the producers and packagers put those materials into the stores and into our homes, have no responsibility for what happens at the end of life. This is an act that actually brings them into financial participation with you and with our communities to help in the development of recovery of new materials. So starting in July, you'll start to see on their curbside collection list new materials are going to be added. Things like what we call gable top and aseptic packaging. So soup cartons, milk cartons, goldfish containers, things that have a little bit of plastic on the outside. those will be added. Nursery pots will be added. Clam shells, different plastics. And then at our drop-off depots, things like styrofoam, plastic bags, large plastic pails and containers, bubble wrap. All those types of materials are going to start being added to either our curbside program or to the recycling drop-off station, and funded by the producers and packagers. So, wanted to make you aware that that's coming. You'll start to get a lot more information from the waste haulers as well as the county and the city of Bath by the beginning of July. And then the last piece I wanted to touch on is some of the work that we're going to be doing relative to litter control and litter pickup. So historically, you know that, and you're well aware that you're on the pathway to the landfill. And people are coming down the Reed Market, coming down 27th, 15th, Ferguson, Murphy Road, et cetera, trying to make their way over to the landfill. We do have TARP requirements for people to tarp the roads to try and control litter. We enforce that by charging people more if they don't have a tarp. Having the sheriff department puts folks out about 20 hours a week along the pathway to look at the targeting roads. Our staff is now handing out more flyers. But the other thing we're doing this year is we're going to be hiring 3 more staff people, particularly to deal with the issue of litter and litter control. I'll be picking up along 27th Street, Ferguson, Rickard Road, and I'll also be doing it around our other transfer stations here in the county. We have been working with the Sheriff's Department at juvenile offender program, but that's been difficult for them to get people out on a regular basis. And this is a growing concern in your neighborhoods as well as around the community. So we're going to hire folks, see what we can do, and expand our efforts in regards to that. Hopefully we got. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. Federal law that around the adding recyclables. No, that was a state law. So Oregon is one of 6 states. In Oregon and Maine were the first 2 states to pass that legislation. And now we're starting to see California, Colorado, Minnesota, Maryland have all passed subsequently. New Jersey, Illinois, somewhere else are looking at it. Washington State. So it's a growing. It happens all around Europe, Canada, and Southeast Asia. The question is, are we going to be adding textile recycling? That's a good question. Not within this next year. However, your haulers, Cascade Disposal and Republic Services offer something called Recycle Plus, which is a new subscription program that does take textiles. It takes, right now, it takes film plastic, batteries, light bulbs, a whole slew of other things. Textiles are actually they take on a regular basis or once a quarter. But that's a recent program that they added, subscription, so you have to pay for that service. They will come pick it up. But if you look at that program and look at what they accept, you can drop it off. The same materials that if they collect, you pay for, you can drop it off at their offices for free. So textiles will be something I'll drop off on that also. For Cascade Disposal? Oh, it's at Cascade Disposal's offices. Anything else?
You said the transfer station is going to handle the trash. Will it also handle yard waste transfer?
The yard waste facility is currently going to stay where it is, so we'll continue to take that there. We are looking to potentially resite that because it's not big enough to handle all of the three that are currently there. So we may move it up north to that area. Again, if we have water, we need a lot of water for that process. Anything else? Oh, and I will add one more thing. I looked at you, Brian. But we did receive a grant from Visit Bend. It's a sustainability grant. And what that is we've purchased containers for recycling garbage and food waste that are available for the public to use, or if you're having an event of any kind. You can use these containers for free. The county will have them. You can come in and borrow them from the county, use them for the event, bring them back, you can bring the recyclables back for free, et cetera. If you have questions about that, if you have a big event that's coming up, give us a holler at the solid waste department and we can make those things available for you. What we're trying to do is model how can you reduce waste or make an event as close to zero waste as possible. So within that, we'll provide resources. What are the products that you might want to use for an event that would fit into the recycling stream?
And are those bins on a trailer or anywhere people need to bring the trucks and haul off?
Yeah, so we're actually part of that grant, we will be purchasing a trailer as well. What we're working through is the county will have to deliver that trailer or sign on the bottom line. They have responsibility. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
Are you doing for every? Everybody's seeing on camera. We need to take care of our business.
Yes, we need to take care of our board elections tonight. All of us are up for re-election, so we're gonna go through that real quick, like.
We don't know who's up for election.
We actually don't know, we're using a blanket one.
If you want us.
Our boss is out of town.
So we should say that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we're gonna do elections, Karen. Okay. We have Karen Johnson, she's our land use lady.
So we're just introduce everybody.
I am Jen Sawyer, I do social media. This is Brian Kennedy, he is at large. This is Ross, sorry Ross, I forgot your last name.
Ross.
Okay, Ross works. He does IT and tech. So we'll just go through the list. Karen Johnson, all those. Oh, does anybody want to run against us? Anybody want to join?
We're joining the board.
Yeah, we're joining the board. We're a lot of fun.
Yeah, we have 5, if we were to get here. We have 5 of 7. So we're still even should you want us to be continuing our roles, we still have 2 open positions. So we wouldn't like to vote on those tonight. Certainly could use the help, and if you're so inclined, we'd love you to reach out to someone this evening who will arrange follow-up conversations.
All right, let's start with Karen Johnson. All those in favor?
Yeah.
Let's go to Brian. Any opposed? No, never, not Karen. All right, Brian, all in favor?
Yeah.
Any opposed? Ross, all in favor? Any opposed? Myself, Jen Sawyer, all in favor? Any opposed? Great. What about? And,
Next time. I just had a random question. We have obviously talked about 3 different neighborhoods that are somewhat involved in this meeting. Curious to know who's here. So just by show of hands, if you're a resident of the Old Farm District, Okay. If you're a resident of the Southeast Bend neighborhood district, and if you're a resident of Larkspur, nice. And if you're a resident from something other than those three, excellent. Yeah. Appreciate you all being here. And we are going to have our panelists come forward at this point, and we will begin the wildfire presentation part of our meeting. Again, we're anticipating that some of these questions are going to be across panelists in terms of, in responses. So for that reason, we're going to have our folks do their presentation, all the questions, and then we'll address all the questions at the end. All right, so we have Mike. And first up, are we going to follow our timeline? Okay, so Carrie, introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm very impressed with your turnout. This is amazing. My name is Julie Gray. I'm enforcement officer of the city. Been doing this for about 16 years in the city, around 21. I came on board for enforcement in 2009 when we were in the middle of a recession and I was laid off. And the fire department no longer wanted to take care of the enforcement side of final vegetation, which made perfect sense because we are ready, willing, and able to deal with it. That's what we do. So our main goals with code enforcement, whether it's final vegetation or any of the other codes that we enforce, is education and voluntary compliance. We work with folks who may have a violation to gain that voluntary compliance. We have about a 97% rate of voluntary compliance in the city, meaning we help people get to that end game of having their properties in compliance with the best interests of themselves, their neighbors, and our community, especially in the sense of wildfire mitigation and vulnerable vegetation. We want to make sure that if and when, Melissa will say, when we have an event, a wildfire event in our community, we can reduce the risk at the best that we can so that we can prevent a Paradise or a Los Angeles fire event. So, and I'll let her go into all of that detail. For us, our intent is to reduce the vegetation on your property. So again, so that we can reduce any risk in our community. Our code is a little, it can be a little vague in areas. It can seem a little restrictive in areas, depending on where you're reading. First of all, if you have a property that is under a half acre, our code will state that you must reduce all flammable vegetation or potentially flammable vegetation on your property. As you can imagine, anything on your property is probably flammable. So we do not ask that you clear cut and moonscape your property to the point where there's just nothing left. There's obviously common sense there, and Melissa's going to go into more detail on what you can do for defensible space. So we're trying to meet the intent of our code, which is to reduce as much as we can within reason, and still have a beautiful community with beautiful yards and that are maintained and kept up throughout the year. And I will say throughout the year, because we will enforce this in the middle of winter if we see property that, or get a complaint on property that does need some work. Oftentimes in our mild winters, that's a great time to be doing some of this work before we hit the dry, hot season where it can be a little more riskier to cut trees down or limb trees or whatever work may need to be done. If you have a property that is over half acre, the code will talk about a 20-foot fuel break and having a 20-foot fuel break around any structures or like power poles, things like that. We do have a caveat in that code that states that we can require additional abatement wherever we see necessary. So that means we can ask for more work to be done as is necessary for the community and for the hazard on the property. So that's the work that we do. Along with a lot of other things as well. We are primarily complaint-based. However, we will be proactive whenever we have the resources and the availability to do so. Flammable vegetation is a part of our code that we will be proactive in throughout the year. We do expect to start being more proactive with flammable vegetation in the next couple of weeks and getting out there in the community and driving around and trying to find areas that really are high risk, very hazardous right now. We're not coming to the well-maintained HOA communities that are not quite as bad as another area that is full of dead grass and dense vegetation and no limbing of trees, etc. We're gonna go and look for those bigger areas those areas that are higher risk and really need some work done more immediately. That's about it. Like I said, we always strive for voluntary compliance and to educate the community. We are very rarely punitive. We do have that ability to issue a citation if it's necessary. Oftentimes it is not, thankfully. Unfortunately, there are folks in the community sometimes that just don't want to comply, and they just maybe don't see why it's important. When that happens, we do have the ability to issue a citation, a fine for a flammable vegetation violation is $750 a day that the violation is occurring. So that can add up really quickly if you don't want to comply. But again, we want to work with folks. We understand that sometimes it's not easy to get out there right away and do this work. Sometimes you can hire somebody and they have schedules and they're backed up. We are always ready and willing to work with people to get that compliance, because ultimately the compliance is what keeps our community safe, not a citation. So that's what we do. Pretty quick and down and dirty, but I'm sure there'll be questions, so I'm happy to answer them.
Do you have questions now? Or later? Later? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Oh, and I also have a brochure back there on the table, as well as this flyer with some links to our websites. And I did not bring enough. I did not expect this to be this many people, but I'm happy to get more for anybody who needs it, and I send a digital copy of this to anyone too.
Thank you, Julie. I'm gonna come up here because I'm vertically challenged. You guys can see me. My name is Melissa Steele. I'm a fire inspector for Bend Fire and Rescue. I have been with the prevention division here for 3 years. I have been in the fire service for 24 years. I started the day after I graduated high school and got the fire bug and never looked back. So I feel very blessed to be able to work in the prevention division now. I feel like we're reaching more people than just fighting fire, right? There's a lot of fires we go to and we love those guys and girls and they're great, but the prevention is super important. And so what I'm gonna talk to you about today is Bend Fire's Own Your Zone First 5 Feet program. This is a program I came up with 3 years ago. I moved from Paradise, California. That's exactly what I get every time I say that. So we're right on cue. So I was part of the campfire. I worked for CAL FIRE at the time. I did lose my home. When I came here, I saw that there was a lot of work to be done. And I wanted to bring that to all of you. So we did Own Your Zone First 5 Feet. Good. So the purpose and the objective of this program basically is to empower all of you, to let you know that if there's a large scale wildfire, and I use that term wildfire very loosely, I'm talking urban fire. Wildfires are in the forest, right? I'm talking urban fires, homes that are the fuel, homes that are burning, that tend to be the fuel in this situation. That's what happened in Paradise, that's what happened in Lahaina, that's what happened in Southern California, right? So what I want to get out of this program and share with all of you is that the first 5 feet of your home is the most critical, and it's the easiest to do something about, okay? So this is also to empower you guys as a district, as a community, as a Firewise community, or if you have an HOA board, to jump on with us and become Firewise, okay? So structure to structure ignition.
That's what we're trying to prevent with that 0 to 5 feet. So this was a fire event last year. This was December. So imagine if that was in August. So you can see that there were ashes put into a plastic trash can. And that spread from the wooden fence right down to the neighbor's house and then up the side. So these homes are so close together that when we get that radiant heat, we have structure to structure ignition. Now let's talk about August and let's talk about a red flag warning day with winds 35 miles an hour. Okay, we need to prevent these homes from igniting in the first place. So there's a couple types of heat transfer, and I'm gonna geek out here for a minute because I love fire heating. We have conduction. Conduction is that direct flame against the home. Okay, so that would be like a tree branch that's on fire that's touching your roof. Okay, we have radiation, which are the electromagnetic waves that you can feel, like you feel campfire, so radiant heat, structure to structure ignition, right? And then the last one is convection, and that's the smoke column. All those embers are in the air and they land somewhere else. Which one of those do you think causes more homes to burn down in a wildfire? Embers, exactly. Embers can travel, they've proven up to 3 to 4 miles. So you can imagine how hard it is for us to get ahead of that fire. If we have a fire here in Bend, we have embers, they're landing on people's homes. What are they landing in the first 5 feet of that home? Think about what you have right now against your home. Okay, next one. That right there. That's what it looks like, right? So when we're talking about that first 5 feet, making it a non-combustible environment, this is why. Embers don't discriminate. You're in a high zone, you're in a moderate zone, you're in a low zone, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, those embers go right up and over and land on whatever you have next to your house. So on the left-hand side is the Campfire Paradise. That's my neighborhood. My house was one of those. Okay. An interesting thing about this photo, look at all the ponderosas. They're all green and beautiful. They didn't burn down. So when we have flammable vegetation code, we are not trying to tell you to cut your trees down because it's proven that that's not what's causing these urban fires. These houses were so close together after one of them went up, that radiant heat, it was 90 on that day, 90 degrees, and that was in November. We get that structure to structure ignition. Over on the right is Waldo Canyon in Colorado. In the center there, it's kind of hard to see, but in the center there, all of those homes are burnt. And the ones that burned first were on the very south end of this photo, the very bottom. Wind shifted and went to the middle of those homes. That's all ember driven. So what does this all mean? This means you guys can do a lot. So home hardening, how many of you have heard that term? It's kind of a newer thing, most of you have. So home hardening, this is your priority list. What are the things we can do first? So if you look up here, red, in the red, that's your highest priority. So vegetation, what flammable vegetation do you have against your home or within that first 5 feet? We need to remove that, okay? It's also showing your deck or your fence. Interesting that most of these homes are connected by wooden fences. Interesting. So what can you do? You can replace that first 5 feet of your fence with a metal gate. Give it that breakup from a combustible to a non-combustible. Okay. There's a lot we can do, but I only have like 10 minutes, so we're gonna go through this. And so you can see as you're going down, or I say, I guess, up the list, you can see what your priorities are. And there's tons of information on our home protection strategies course. There is going to be a QR code for that at the end of my presentation. So immediate zone, first 5 feet, focus on the closest. This is a house in Deschutes River Woods. I picked this photo just to show that even though you have ponderosas everywhere, there is a way to manage the needles. They put that first 5 feet of non-combustible rock, which is excellent. And then they've kind of sporadically thinned out their brush. Excellent thing to do. Install 8-inch metal mesh screening on your foundation and eave vents. okay? Most eave or soffit beds are already 1/8 inch, but I will guarantee that 99.9% of the homes that you guys are all living in are 1/4 inch for your foundation. So you can buy that in a roll, $35, you can cut it to fit, and you can tack it with some construction adhesive, and you put it right over the 1/4 inch. So there's some things you can do. Let's see, go ahead and next one. Here's some more options. The one on the left, put in some non-combustible ground cover, they put in rock, and then they have a wooden fence, which is kind of hard to see, but they replace their metal gate right there that's actually touching their structure. And then the one on the right is a home in Tethero, and they put rock underneath their deck, which is excellent. Think about those numbers again. They go through the deck, what are they landing on? Rock, so they're gonna go out. What we want to avoid, bark mulch against your siding. Bark mulch can hold embers and heat for up to 3 weeks. So we get fires all summer long where people put a cigarette out in a pot near a business, and the business will call the fire department and say, I smell smoke, but I can't see anything. It's because that bark mulch is actually combusting under the bottom layer, just waiting for a gust of wind. So bark mulch is one thing you want to remove. A combination of bark mulch with really flammable vegetation right under a window. Why is that important? Your window is the first thing that's going to fail in a wildfire. If that vegetation under the window catches radiant heat, convective heat, all against your window. So there's things we can work on with that. Another thing we want to avoid, any of the arborvitae hedges against a wooden fence. That's just a lot of extra fuel that we don't need. And then this house on the right was a person that really wanted their privacy. And I had to explain to them that they basically have a wick of really flammable fuel in their front yard. So we can thin those out. Okay. This is why we want to avoid it. Again, so there you go. On that left-hand side, that's an arborvitae bush. They're all over the city of Bend. Look at the intensity that puts off. That's insane, right? How many engines does it take to put out one structure fire? 3. How many engines do we have in the city? 6. Now, think about that one. We can make sure our homes don't catch on fire. That's why this is so important. So, working with your neighbors. Become FireWise on your HOA boards, on your neighborhood associations. Have that person that comes to our Project Wildfire meetings that can get all the information of, what it means to be FireWise. FireWise means that you are recognized as a community that knows you have fire risk. And because of that, you get benefits. You're opened up to free grant money. So that's a good thing for fuels mitigation and stuff like that. So it's a really good program. This right here is the QR code for our home protection strategies course. This is a 3-hour course. Everything I just talked about, but way in detail and how you can assess your own homes, or you can become an assessor. Right now, what is this, April? We have 320 something wildfire risk assessment requests right now. Do you know how many we did last year, all total? 115. So the word's out that fire is a real thing. So this class will teach you what to look for. It's a really, really cool program. Let's see, we have one coming up in the Bend area. It's just Shoes River Woods. I can write down, I don't have that on me, but I can give you the date or write that down on a card for you. So that was a lot of information. I'm pretty much at my end time now, but I did want to mention something else. January 7th. What happened on January 7th? What was that? LA fires. Guess what happened on that exact same day? The high hazard letters went out here. That was not on purpose. That was a coincidence. So people saw LA, they got their letter saying they're in a high hazard zone, and that's where all this is coming from. Hazard is different than risk. A hazard map is showing you geographically what your hazard is. If you live on the coast, your hazard map would have a tsunami on it. Can't change that. We can't change a high fire hazard in Central Oregon. Not gonna happen. Fire risk is what you guys can mitigate that is against your home and on your properties. Okay, so I want make sure we know the difference between that. And that is my presentation.
Hi, Russ.
Hey, Brian.
Welcome to the show. I am vertically challenged, not like Russ, so I too. Shall come up here. So we're gonna switch gears a bit here. Alyssa was talking about what you can do on your own and the importance of each one of us. What's that? Oh, I will. That was Melissa, this is Brian. My name is Brian Reagan, and I work for the city of Bend. And I get to manage what's called long-range planning in our growth management division. So what I wanted to kind of get at is that Melissa's talking about something very tangible, and I'm going to kind of bring it up to a level from an individual home to a city scale, because that's most of my job. So I was asked tonight to talk about, okay, well, here's what you can do on your house and create defensible space, but what is the city doing in terms of planning for growth and also addressing risks associated with wildfire? So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. And as you know, we're growing. And so I want to start this with some level setting, because I think there are some people that would love, how many would you just say stop growing? Just, all right, and I don't know your name, so I can't report you. Okay, there's no more growth. Okay. All right. That is probably, by the way, the most surprising percentage that I've ever seen in asking that question. So, I think one thing I'd like to share just before we talk about growth, because a lot of folks, I think, especially been here for a long time, you've been through it. You know, we've all been through the ringer into all the changes that are occurring in the community. Traffic, congestion, there's just change happening all around us. But we're in Oregon, and in Oregon, we're in a statewide land use planning system of statewide laws and statewide rules that require cities to plan for growth. So did you know, for example, that the state of Oregon says, okay, hey, city of Bend and community of Bend, that you are going to have to plan for upwards of 30,000 new dwelling units in Bend in the next 20 years. It's a staggering number. It's even higher than our population. So we have an obligation. And then the question is for us as a community, how are we going to do that? And that's where our department or division works with the community to say, here are the state rules, and let's talk about how we as a community can come together and do this. And part of that, and part of the issue is how we manage and address the risks of wildfire. So part of what we do in our work is say, okay, we're going to look at the city and we're going to ask ourselves a question. How many housing units do we need? And now, what's our capacity to absorb those housing units with our current urban growth boundary? Have folks heard of the urban growth boundary? Okay, so you know the urban growth boundary. It's a ring that's supposed to hold your urban development. And we need to have a 20-year supply of land to support our economy and support housing development for our growth for that 20-year period. So as you might expect, with all that growth, there is a need to expand your urban growth boundary. And so part of the strategy is to figure out, well, if you're going to expand that urban growth boundary, how do you do so in a way that does not make the situation worse? So there are two main strategies. One is you get really good use out of the urban land that you have. Right? So if you'll notice in the core of the city, kind of a lot of folks like on, if you're driving down Arizona or Colorado, you see that new building, right? It's 5 stories, 6 stories tall. You look at it and go, oh my gosh, that's not bad. And you're right, that is new Bend. But that's around 300 to 400 dwelling units. And if not there, then that would be 300 to 400 dwelling units that would be spread out in some of the kind of subdivisions in this community. So part of the strategy in reducing wildfire risk of our community is to build housing units where you have lower risk in the first place. So if you look at some of these risk maps, for example, there's a trend. You have Forest Service land to the west, you have BLM to the south, and you have our rural areas. And those tend to have higher risks associated with that. You run into an irrigated area, oh, right next to irrigated farmland, you have low risk, you have a bit of a fire buffer there. In the core of the city, you actually have quite a bit lower risk relative to some of the areas around. So we have a two-pronged strategy in the city, and this complies with state law. And it's kind of, this is the voice of other people in the community saying, look, if we're gonna deal with growth, we understand we need to, that we are gonna go up in some places, mostly in the core of the city, and then we're gonna go out in other places. So let's talk about, we talked about the up part, now let's talk about the out part. When we expand our urban growth boundary, and the last time we did this in 2016 is a big look, we took a look at fire risk. Fire risk, fire hazard, it's a very complex subject. It's its own science. It's Thomas Killen. So we looked at that risk, and then there were some areas that really stood out as being higher risk. And some of those areas, the west side in particular, they received essentially a requirement that they would have to build to a higher standard of fire resilience and incorporate the practices that Melissa talked about. So that's one strategy. The other, and that same strategy has been applied also in recent urban growth boundary expansions in the southeast area. Like Stevens Road Track, are you familiar with Stevens Road Track? That's a piece of land between Stevens Road and Ferguson. It was added to the urban growth boundary a few years ago. That development will have higher standards for fire resilience. And so we as a city said, you developer, when you do this, you're gonna have to show us how you're incorporating these practices into your development. And those are typically recorded in covenants, codes, and restrictions that come with the land. So you have homeowners associations that therefore enforce it. And so we take a look at these things during the building permitting process, and then ongoing, that should be maintained by an HOA. Similar to your other CCNRs proposed to have those. And then also the one-time EGB extension off of Mount Road, those things standing for a plan. I love that song. You should really sing. So those are really the big strategies. Go up in places with low risk. And by the way, those buildings that you see have very low fire risk. They're all sprinkled. They tend to not have vegetation. They tend to not have the kinds of ignition sources in and around them. And they tend to be built to a higher commercial standard that can withstand more of those incidental ember storms that might happen. So that is one strategy. The other one is to apply those FireWise standards when we expand so that they flow through the development. And we're about to embark on another 20-year look, another 20-year plan. And I think because of this kind of attendance, the interest, I'm really excited to see what else we can do the next time. Can we do more and do better? So what has been done in the past can be improved upon in the future. And we're about to embark on a big project, one road plan, going forward in the next couple of years. So with that, I'll turn it over to
me. Okay.
There you go. Somebody that actually knows something really about fire.
Thank you, sir. Well, good evening. My name is Nathan Garrett. I'm a lieutenant with the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office, and I currently hold the position as the emergency manager for the Deschutes County. So in that role that I've held for going on 12 years, I get the opportunity to work with a number of people, actually all the people here at this table, and a lot of others. My partner, friend and partner from the city of Denver, Spanish, Carrie Carl's in the audience somewhere out there. So, and we're a team on how we address risk and safety and emergency management issues in not only Bend, but in the Greater Bend area and Deschutes County and Central Oregon as a whole. So we recognize that although we are very deeply concerned with our own backyard, none of us are safe unless we're all safe. And so we try to work together. So that's kind of a concept I want to talk about before I really get into the point of evacuation. I love following some of these other conversations. Listen, I haven't presented in a while, but I always like to follow Melissa, because what I do is I say, if you do what Melissa says, we may not have to evacuate. Because the goal here is to not have to evacuate. And I'm gonna ask, this is an optional quiz. And trust me, if you answer in the negative, I will not issue a citation. I don't even know where my ticket is. But if you drove here today, who wore their seatbelt? If I would have asked that question 30, 40 years ago, what do you think the percentage of people raising their hand? Really low. Yeah. So what I'm talking about is long-term change in culture and how we look at risk and the things we do to keep ourselves safe. And that's what we're talking about here. When I grew up in Central Oregon, sorry if you're not a Redmond Panther, but I'm a graduated Redmond High Redmond Panther, class of 1996. And I remember as a kid coming to Bend, and the population sign said 17,000 and change. Boy, have we changed. In fact, when I started with the sheriff's office 26 years ago, I'm pretty sure this right here was not in the city. So we've changed a lot. And I like to think that these changes that we see, these changes that we can do now and implement are going to make us safer in the long run. And that's a lot about cultural change. So after the Skeleton fire and a number of Aubrey Hall fire, a lot of changes were made that shake roofs. We don't do those anymore. Imagine if we had changed some of these other things that like Melissa talks about, and we'd have really aggressively looked at how we're preparing ourselves, our homes, and our families for evacuation. So now I'm going to get to meet Dave. And I think there's going to be plenty of time because we're running ahead of schedule for questions. So when we talk about evacuation, what we're really talking about is the movement of people away from a hazard. That could be a wildfire, it could be a hazardous materials incident, it could be, you name it, right? And the reality of it is we don't always know the risks that we're going to be impacted by, and we don't always know the circumstances that are going to happen and how that's going to play out. So we don't know how fast we need to move. We may not know the direction we're going to have to go, but there are some things we can control. And there are some things we can prepare for, and that is how ready we are to move when we get that notice, and how quickly we can change that decision leg. So once we issue an evacuation notice, or the city issues an evacuation notice, what does that mean? If you can be ready out the door in 10 minutes, that's going to significantly improve the speed at which you can evacuate, as opposed to if it takes you 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or if you think about it, how should I go? Should I stay? So those things we can control. Some of the things we can't control is where the hazard is. If we're talking fire, and that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to plan evacuation plans specifically around fire, is we don't know where the fire is until it happens, and we don't know what those current fire those weather conditions are that might change or affect the spread and the rate of spread of that fire. So oftentimes we're left with about 80% of the information we need to know to make a decision, and we have to be prepared to fill in the gap of that 20% and get you good information so you can get out the door. So a couple things I just want to highlight. How many people in here are registered for Deschutes alerts to get notifications? Perfect. I hope someday that everybody in the room raise their hand. It was pretty dang close. Okay, how many people in here have updated your profile in the last year? Oh yeah, Sean's over here too. Good to see you. Yeah, we got some work on that. Why do you think that's important? Has anybody moved, changed phone numbers? Have you looked at make sure it still works? Right? We're going to do a test on May 7th. If you're signed up and opted in and you live in Deschutes County, which I'm assuming everybody in here does, you'll get a text or an alert or an email and all sorts of things on May 7th. And that's an opportunity for you to go in there and A, make sure you got the alert. And if you didn't, figure out why. So you log in your profile and figure out what's wrong. And the other thing you can do is help me and help Carrie and help Sean from the City of Bend and help everybody else up there. Tell at least one or two neighbors and friends and say, hey, did you sign up? Did you get that alert? No. Well, hey, here's how you get signed up. That's going to be the single best way for you to get critical information. We've become very efficient in getting that information out. When a decision is made to evacuate, or a decision is made to shelter in place for some other hazard, or if law enforcement's running around your neighborhood looking for a bad guy, we can get that information out to you through that system. And we've become pretty efficient at it. So we've lowered the decision lag on our end, by a lot of processes that we have in place to make decisions regarding whether to evacuate, what area to evacuate. We've reduced the decision or the time lag on how long it takes to get those alerts out. And if you can reduce the lag on the amount of time it takes for you to get out the door and head in the right direction, what we're talking is those minutes add up to several minutes, and that could be the difference between a higher success rate of evacuation versus lower success rate of evacuation. And we all know that oftentimes, you drive Reed Market at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that's a challenge. Many of us, myself included, may have ran into that challenge. But what we can do is we can reduce those minutes on the front end of that evacuation. So yes, you might be in traffic, you might get stuck in traffic. But we have great partnerships with the public works agencies and ODOT, city transportation, county road department, to implement strategies to try to keep some of that traffic. Now that does take time, you know this. But the reality of it is we can only control certain parts of it, and those are really the pieces. Just real quick, a super evacuation 101. Does everybody know that in Oregon, we use a 3-level evacuation system, ready, set, go? Yep, perfect. So level 1, ready, is, hey, there's something going on out there. 99% of the time in Central Oregon, it's a wildland fire or a fire of some sort. Be paying attention. Might be an opportunity for you to go, I have a go kit, I'll just go throw it in the car. I might turn my car around, back it in the driveway, so I'm not having to hurry up and back out. Opportunity for you to call your neighbor, knock on your neighbors next door, like, hey, did you get that alert? We're on level 1, this is what's going on. Turn on the news, start checking, local public safety, social media, start getting yourself informed, figuring out where this hazard is, the likely direction you might have to leave, start thinking about those so you've reduced that challenge. At level 2, really what that means is that danger is more significant, and we're really encouraging a lot of people, particularly those that are going to take a long time to evacuate. If it's going to take you a lot longer to evacuate, or you live in a neighborhood that's hard to get out of on rush hour, maybe that's at level 2. You're like, I think I'll just go up to Redmond, find a different restaurant I'm not used to, and go to dinner for the night. Level 3 is that risk is imminent. We're not saying it's going to burn your house. We're not saying it's going to burn in your neighborhood. What we're saying is the conditions are right, and if things continue to progress the way they are, there's a higher likelihood that we're comfortable with that fire or that threat can impact your neighborhood. The one key piece I want to get across though is it doesn't always go that nice clean progression of level 1, ready, set, go. Sometimes we're talking about those days, that red flag warning. Everybody know what a red flag warning is? Yeah, red flag, when you see red flag warning, that means that conditions are right for that high likelihood of rapid fire spread, right? So when you see those days, sometimes those fires we arrive right on scene, we're like, this is a level 3 evacuation right now, so we'll get that. So when we talk about evacuation planning, really what we're talking about is developing and improving those systems of how we can alert people, how we can continue to facilitate the movement of people, traffic during evacuation, and how we can help support some of our people that might need additional use during evacuation. That's a lot of the work we've been doing. In partnership with the city of Bend, we'll be doing more work along the lines of looking at some data-driven decision-making tools to help us kind of evaluate where some of our challenges are in the community and what are some potential mitigation action items we can do to improve success. So that's kind of where the future's going over the next couple of years. We have a lot of those foundational elements that have been built out. We have a lot of good products. The reality of it is kind of the next iteration is how do we kind of codify that into more of a useful playbook, so to speak, for when we do evacuations. Carrie, did I miss anything? Okay. She's my gut check over there. So, all right, thank you very much.
So, good evening, everybody. I'm Russ Grayson, I'm the Chief Operations Officer / Assistant City Manager down at City Hall. So, I have cameras in the apologize, I was late. I had another public meeting downtown that didn't have that much attendance. Not gonna lie, so I have the easy part of this because it's always nice to go after a lot of really smart people talk about specific information. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of things and just kind of add some touch points from the city. So my basic role down in the city is to try to figure out how to plan, what Evan and Brian was talking about, build, and then operate and maintain a city that needs to grow about 145, 130,000 people. Simple job. But we're trying to do that in a, as you can tell, there is a lot of thought that goes into it. The other thing I just want everyone in the audience to know is we have a lot of smart people. They're up here and a whole staff downtown and across the city that are working hard to figure out these problems. We have people thinking about all the things that you're concerned about every day. I know sometimes you may not feel that as you drive around and you get detours, construction and development going on everywhere, but there is a lot of thought. Everything that you see that is going on is planned. Where buildings are going, where development is going, where roads are getting built, why they're getting built, the size of the roads are getting built. It is all planned through a lot of different documents, and there are a lot of, as Brian was alluding to, state rules and requirements that we need to think about and also guide us on how we do. Couple things that I'll touch on just in terms of evacuation routes and everything. I kind of always channel the fire chief in my head when I hear these things is, one, you know your neighborhoods better than anybody else. You know the different ways to get in and out of your neighborhoods. So always keeping that in mind. As Nathan alluded to, we don't know where, if there's a fire, we don't know what direction it's coming from, we don't know how it's behaved, we don't know what it's going to block and what it's not. So make sure you know your neighborhoods and leave early. I always channel the fire chief. He's like, do not wait for the fire department to come and knock on your door until you leave. That's way too late. So the best thing you can do is leave early and know the different ways to get out. One of the things that we try to do in the city is we have to play all these balance rules. Because in theory, if you're trying to build a city solely on evacuation routes, then we would have 6 to 8 main roads everywhere to get out of town. Day-to-day life, that is not what we want, right? Because once you do that, there's a whole other host of problems that comes with that, in terms of safety, and how the systems operate. So we're trying to find that balance point of one, how do we make the system work day to day? How do we think about how we get people out on evacuation routes? And then the third leg of that is, how do we pay for it? What can we afford as a community? Because when we talk about all this, it is us in this room, the majority of us, everyone sitting at this table, me included, we're the ones that are funding a lot of the infrastructure and building the town. We do get federal dollars in some things, and as you've been reading the news, that has been drying up over the years. So it's really what can the community afford? And how do we balance all that? And we have to play with a whole bunch of state rules and laws on how to do that. But one of the key components we try to do in our transportation system is connectivity. We try to make sure that there are a lot of, in new developments and where we have opportunities, there's a lot of different ways to get out. A lot of different ways to move through the neighborhoods so that you don't always have to get on the main road to get to another place. Sometimes you can move internal in neighborhoods. It's not that case all over town, but these are the type of things that we look at. Not only one to provide a better city, that you can move through the city with different modes of travel, but also we can provide that connectivity so that we're not building 4 to 8 main roads everywhere, but we can still move everybody where they need to go. I'm going to kind of leave it there because I think a lot has already been spoken to, but we can probably move into the Q&A session on this because we can go through a wide variety of topics. I want to make sure we're addressing where the community wants to be. So I don't know how you want to handle whoever, ladies are. And I'll also introduce Mike Riley, who's one of your city councilors, who's also doing this.
Check. All right, so we're gonna walk the microphone. I'm now the official walker.
Good call.
The reality is the trains are here and there's still traffic. So how is that gonna be handled? Those of us who sat behind us all the northern train.
Yeah, a couple things on that. I'll talk about the train first. One of the key projects of our general obligation bond that just got passed, $190 million general obligation bond for transportation. That's why you see a lot of construction going on in town, and every time you see detour signs, a lot of that has to do with we're building $190 million for transportation routes in town. One of the key projects is building a bridge over Reed Run. And because we understand the impact. In fact, we were awarded a grant from the federal government to also help pay for that, which is great news because then we can use bond money to go for other things. Everything going on, we're trying to make sure we still have secure line to those funds. That bridge will be built. And one of the things that you're seeing now is that's why Murphy first, will say is when we need to build that bridge over the rail and remarket, we're gonna have to completely shut down remarket for a period of time. Right? Yay! Yay! I mean, raise your hands, do you love the wall parking culture too? That's another beauty in town, I know everybody loves that one too. But that's one, it's one of those, there is a little bit of, I guess, community pain. You got to
Good to stay in front of the
build
camera.
that, for the rail bridge that's coming in the next couple of years, we're actually in design on that now, trying to work how the federal grant money works. I know, but on the signal, I'm going to the signals now. So there is some coordination that we can do with the signals. We're trying to embed technology in them. We have several old signals in town. We build new signals, we try to link them and connect them. We have to do that. As Nathan alluded to, in the case of an emergency, we can do a lot of different things. We can police and fire, we can get to the intersections, control the intersections. We need to, if we have time, we can make signals one directional if we need, working in coordination with ODOT. So there's things that we can do depending on what the situation is. Most of the signal timing, what you try to do with that is more for every day, right? So if it's 27th, we're trying to interconnect all those signals. So as you're driving down 27th, you get a nice platoon. If you're green the whole way to certain speed. So those type of things.
Would you mind standing in front?
Sure. I tend to row. It's my natural. Talk with my hands and I row.
So we're gonna go over here.
Okay, electrical companies have a long history of bad behavior. In regards to not shutting down when there's ignoring orders. What sort of dialogue is being undertaken to tell them what to do?
Yeah, I would say that, so public utilities in Oregon are regulated through the Oregon Public Utilities Commission. And there's two types of electrical utilities. One is an investor-owned utility, so that'd be like your Pacific Power. The other one would be like a co-op. So for like Central Electric co-op for that area, those are the two. We'll find we have Mid-State Electric. They do fall under slightly different rules and regulations as far as what the Oregon Public Utility Commission through state legislation is required of them. But one of the things that most of them are doing, whether they're required or not, is to develop what's called a public safety power shutoff program and plan. And what they really attempt to do is mitigate, is kind of that balance test, right? It's that balance of, is it safer to turn off the power because of a significant risk of wind, predominantly wind, and infrastructure and fuels, where all those align. Or they're balancing that with the significant impacts of shutting off power. So when you lose traffic signals, you lose all those things, there are downsides to shutting off power. And so it's always a balance. I don't want to speak to exactly their metrics on when they shut power off, but they do have a plan in place, and a lot of that is really based on the infrastructure in that particular community, the design of it, the age of it, the height and likelihood of tree impacts on that, all those things kind of figure in, and then they look at what are the fuel conditions, likely of source of the likelihood of like probability of ignition, and what is the appropriate, what is that wind speed when they start to get into that area. So can't really get into more of that because that's all on them. But I will say the other things they do is they have some other things around like reclosers, for example. So if you have a fault on a power line, that could be set to different levels of sensitivity. So that fault, that might reclose and keep power going because they don't want to have an unnecessary power outage. Typically, when we get into summer conditions, they change the sensitivity on that, so that won't reclose, and they'll have to send a lineman or a crew out to check the line before they can re-energize. So those are some of the things they're trying to do to kind of mitigate that. The reason why I know this is they tell us this. They communicate with us, and I believe actually next week there's a Pacific Power is doing a local event in Bend. I'll try to figure out that information, get out, you can share that. But the Pacific Power does do community outreach events to talk about what their plan is. Central Electric also has information on their website that you can check out. Sorry, that was probably way more information than you wanted.
On my ground, Mike, really curious, we got online questions, but first, Southeast Bend, the district is involved, where Jim wants to check in with y'all, okay, at the end of this. Question from the interwebs, in older neighborhoods like King's Sports, which were built to old county standards, will the city start requiring fire hydrants to be installed by water companies to help fight future fires?
Great question. There are no capital projects right now to go into the older parts of town unless there's significant deficiencies with the water system to make these huge improvements. You know, one of the things we are doing is more on the septic sewer side, getting sewer lines in the areas that have aging septic systems. If there are issues with existing utilities in neighborhoods, then we'll go and address those at that time. But there's no plan to, if you don't have a water line in front of your house, we don't have a large capital program to go install those lines unless development occurs, and then we can have development kind of bring some of those lines closer to older neighborhoods.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Sorry, say that again?
Fire hydrants, east side of the fire hydrants, and there's a woods. They're not, you're not in city standards, even close. There's 500-600 feet in fire hydrants.
There's maybe
There's none in the
150
desert
homes,
woods.
maybe 200 homes unsupported, and yet you build a trench right through our street, laid in a sewer line with an opportunity to put in a 6-inch line, and that line didn't go in when the street was up.
We totally understand that was specifically a sewer program. The city does not have a large capital plan to go build lines and improve the old systems. The systems were built to the standards at the time. And if there was a significant situation, we have the ability to go and retrofit as well, but there's no large scale programming to go back into older neighborhoods and add intermediate fire hydrant systems at this point. We just don't have the money to do that.
I can answer some of that, please.
30 engines, what it would take.
Oh, great question. So we're talking about water supply, right? It does not matter how much water we have. It does not matter how many firefighters we have. If every single home is on fire at the same time, we are not fighting fire at that time. We are evacuating, and it's life safety. That's why owning your zone and making sure that your home doesn't catch on fire is incredibly important. We are trying to not have to have that massive, urban wildfire that we're talking about. So with that, when we know that we're responding to a neighborhood that doesn't have hydrants or doesn't have adequate water supply, we increase our response on water tenders, which we have lots of those in the city. Our water tenders follow us. We've got at least 2,500 gallons immediately and more showing up. And that's from Redmond, Lapine, Sun River. They're all coming to us. So when we know that we're in a neighborhood that doesn't have adequate water supply, we have a plan for that. But like I said, we could put in more hydrants. We could have more firefighters, but we are not looking at that to save all of your homes right now. So let's think about what we can do to decrease homes catching on fire and spreading and causing that urban wildfire that we're talking about. Thank you.
And I'll just add one more thing from the engineering perspective. I was the city, I'm a professional civil engineer. I was the city engineer for several years in the first position. The municipal water system is designed to handle maybe 1 or 2 structure fires. It's designed to be able to deliver 1,000 to 3,000 gallons per minute out of a couple hydrants. It is not designed for what you saw in the water. It's almost impossible to design a municipal system that would come even close to handling what's going on. We have storage concerns. We have enough storage in our tanks to fight localized fires. But if you get a widespread fire running through town, no municipal system is set up. And it would be a significant cost if we did it. Again, it's one of those balance things and making sure that we understand what things are designed for, and then in certain situations, what are you supposed to do? Because you just can't plan for and build for every scenario that may happen.
We have a patient gentleman here, and then I promise I will bring the microphone to this side.
Many of us live in the southeast, and we see an enormous number of new homes coming in. and new homes planned to come in. I'm all in favor of that. What I don't see is any widening of any roads or developing any real transportation to get out of the city. I think it'll be a nightmare. I've been through an evacuation before in California, and it's bumper to bumper, and nobody wants to let anybody in. Everybody's looking to get out as quickly as possible. How do you deal with that?
That's a great question, and we actually have Brian chime in a couple of things, because what's interesting is, as Brian was alluding to, with kind of the rules, the state level, and how land use works in Oregon, there are certain rules that we have to comply with, and new rules that come out all the time on how we design the transportation system. So we're now dealing with a new rule as we grow, where we need to grow by another 30, 40,000 people and not increase a metric that's called the average vehicle miles traveled every day by everyone. Right? We also have restrictions on how to widen roads, and can we afford to widen roads? So there is this balance point. And again, that's why we try to provide a lot of connectivity through on different roads so that you can do that. There are large transportation models that occur that look at daily traffic patterns, peak hour traffic patterns. We're looking, because we know evacuation is becoming up more and more of a concern. We are trying to make sure that we are integrating those ideas and concepts into the transportation system. We can't plan for everything that is on there, just our limitations. There's also limitations on what we can build, how much money we can spend to build the system and widen it. There's a lot of existing deficiencies in town that we're trying to fix now. And how we do it. There are limiters on how big and how wide we can build roads. And also, and then it's that balance of how does the day-to-day system work? And then how does, in the emergency situation, how does the systems work? And how do you try to balance those two?
Russ, can you provide a snapshot of, as we look at these maps, but not everyone sees them, of the future of 27th Street, for example, where the roundabouts, the upgrade, etc.
So if you just run down the 27th corner, you see the construction going on now. As development comes in, they have to build a lot of it. So that work that you see on 27th right now, the developer of Stevens Ranch, they're building that. They're also building roundabouts at Ferguson and 27th. 27th and Reed Market, they just built one Wilderness Way that went in there. As the southeast area grows, which is kind of the area around Mount 27th, that road's going to get improved around the corner. There's a couple additional roundabouts are going to go in there. Currently building and trying to build a multi-use bike path system that runs the entire length of 27th. We're getting a system built between Ferguson and Reed Market. We want to make sure that we've got connectivity of that all the way up to kind of Bear Creek and Highway 20. So there's all these improvements, but again, it's a limiter. We don't have current funding to go rebuild 27 from the old, some of the sections of the old county standard. We just don't have the money available to us. So trying to figure out how we balance this and build for all different modes of travel is one of the things.
Okay, so we have a question here, and then we have more questions in the back and another question. So we have a lot of questions. We're going to be here later, folks.
This question is probably for Nathan and
Russ.
So everybody is keenly aware, everybody's seen the imagery of Sunset Boulevard and Palisades Fire with bulldozers pushing cars out of the way because people literally abandoned their cars trying to get out of there. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. I had a house right on the Louie, keenly aware of what happens during evacuations. And I appreciate the comments that no amount of water, aviation assets can't even fly above 40 knots. We're talking about a mass evacuation drill here from the west side. If it really happens, I would assume that we're modeling winds and weather to understand the probability of where that fire is coming from and what it's going to do, how it's going to behave. To me, it seems counterintuitive that they're actually necking down east-west corridors in the city, and in particular on roadways that get people to transit, river, or get across Highway 97. How is that being squared with the city council that we are actually restricting roadways in the context of a high probability of required evacuations? And the second question is, to what extent are you actually able to model these evacuations and or perform rehearsal drills where you're looking at the volume of traffic coming from the west side. You're controlling it, and at the same time, you're facilitating interstate vehicles going the opposite direction to fight the flow. So 2 questions.
Yeah, I may ask Council Riley to come up. I'll tell you, again, from a balancing standpoint, here are all the things that we're thinking. How do we move all modes of travel through the city? When we think about everyday use and talk about density, one of the things we're trying to do as we densify in town is making sure that people can move around through all modes of travel. They can have the ability to drive, they can walk, they can bike, to be able to move around town. That is in direct conflict with moving high volumes of traffic. It is. But when you move high volumes of traffic, if you design a system to move extremely high volume of vehicular traffic, you sacrifice safety of those other modes of traffic. And I'm not pitting one versus the other. There are different considerations in the design of transportation system to figure out how do we want to live day to day, how do we think about emergencies, how do we think about these higher level issues that we have, and come up with an overall transportation system that works. Because as I moved before, we cannot build our way out of this. That is just not a reality in the system. So we work on our transportation planning, we're with rules, and then I'm going to turn over to Council Riley, also with with council and policymakers to try to how do we blend these and come up with an answer that is kind of balanced and tries to address all these needs as best as possible.
Just real quick on the modeling, because that's a great question. Modeling, right? Are you doing the modeling? I was just talking about, can we do that modeling? He mentioned, I've been exploring this because part of what we do when we look forward is you can model transportation behavior. You can model the volume of roadways, right? And you can see where do you have pinch points? Where do you have pinch points now? Where do you have pinch points in the future? So we just talked about it. I was given his name because apparently he had a model. And he said, no, we are looking to.
We've got a grant, trying to get, we're trying to get a grant.
Trying to get a grant for it, it's expensive, so it's about $50,000-$60,000, maybe $78,000. But I want to work with the county and to figure out how can we pull that into our work so we can do this kind of thing. Do some scenario testing. What if everybody had to leave from this part? What if everybody had to leave here? You look at the data, you look at the roadways, and you say, okay, therefore we need strategies that look like this, this, and this. So it's on the horizon.
Just real quickly, Nathan, I just updated my profile in the shoes.
Thank you, sir.
I mean, I don't know that I have a whole lot to add to what was said around this balancing question. You know, that's kind of what we're dealing with as council. We hear from people all the time, and we hear very different perspectives, and oftentimes opposing perspectives. And I think, you know, we are, I think this council as a whole, and myself included, have made a commitment to improve safety across the community, and I think that is what the Greenwood corridors, I guess specifically what was being referenced today, is that a road diet that we apply there. It is what we call a quick build solution, right? So while we did spend some money on it, we didn't spend the kind of money you might spend if you were making those improvements permanently, so that we could test new things. Because as the mayor has said, and I agree with, we need to experiment and try new things across our community. So that's what we're trying to do on Greenwood. The data shows that there is a little bit of extended time it takes people to move in either direction, but it's really not very much. And I'm assuming that long term, eventually we get to a place where, you know, ideally we be thinking about, well, in certain kinds of circumstances, we're maybe going to have to change how we use that road in an emergency situation and have traffic flow in one direction. You know, that stuff is probably part of this problem that has to do with that. So it's a real challenge just to balance everything, I guess, with this thing. And I think it is important. Safety is important. We want to have people feel comfortable being out of their cars for those who want to make those choices. And right now, there's a lot of people who won't do that in a lot of places in our community because it doesn't make sense.
I'll add one more thing, just specifically in the Greenwood project. The reason the Greenwood project is coming back up is because we have Portland right now. Right? There's a direct relation. So the data is skewed right now, and we understand we've got significant ways. The reason we're doing it right now is specifically so we can get Portland open before the summer, before fires. That's why it is closed right now. That's kind of the thinking we go through. So at some point, we're going to have to close Franklin. We're going to Franklin as well. But we try to do that in times that are kind of off the peak tourism season when the biggest load is on the network, And then also provides us the most flexibility during fire season. So that's some of the things coordination we do downtown to figure out. And we're gonna be watching the Greenwood project closely once we get Portland only open back up. That will really distribute the traffic. The reason you see so much backup on there, it's that northbound movement to get on Highway 97 to get up to North Harbor's Avenue. So,
I'm gonna get this guy back here real quick.
Hi, first I want to just say thank you for doing this. You know, in our culture, we put a lot of emphasis in hero worship on television and comic books, Hollywood. This is the heroes right here. So that's really important. And hydrologist, education, and training. I was on the peninsula in Fountainhead, October 8th, o'clock, 2017, Sonosa. And I spent probably one of the most transformative weeks of my life in that experience, the Tubbs Fire. And a lot of folks don't realize that in the first 48 hours of these high intensity, wind-driven, wildland, urban interface events, that even the first responders themselves are not there to work like you see them on television or you understand what they do. It's those events that really change our perception of what it is that we live in right now, this climate-enhanced, drought-enhanced, high-intensity events. So I think it's hugely important to make a distinction between a house that's burning on a day where maybe the relative humidity is a little higher, there's a lower chance of that spreading versus what has become the norm that we see. The Camp Fire, the Hollywood fires, Pasadena, Tubbs Fire. And so to make that distinction is important. The reason I say that is because, and I wanted to be a little creative with my question and my comment here, but I have to belabor it. It's part of the reason I came, is because there is a challenge in the evacuation of this town. I don't think there's any answers in here that's going to just, push the roof off with great ideas. We have a lot of work to do. The reason I say that is because it all goes back to that Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until you're punched in the face. And what we saw in the Tubbs Fire was show horses running through the streets. What I personally witnessed was lights out, de-energized, when fire took out the light. We were in a car accident, my wife and I were hit from behind, and someone was rednecking fire on Petaluma Hills Road. Things happen in these events that you cannot understand. It's when people are tired and stressed and drive up on sidewalks. And so what I'd like to know is there a comprehensive citywide evacuation strategy that we can have access to at some point? And if the answer is no, that's okay. I've asked before, and I'm good to know that it's being worked on. But to know where to go is the question. We've talked a lot about the tricks and all the tricks of how to evacuate, that's all wonderful and really valuable. Where do you want us to go? Because if I'm on Greenwood or I'm on Newport or I'm on one of these roads picking up my daughter after daycare from 3 to 5, and we're stacked up on sardines, people are going to panic and they're going to make decisions that could injure people. And again, I want to reiterate that there is that distinction between that little house fire that you folks do such great work on versus that drop out of humidity, flowing winds, 60, 70 mile per hour sustained winds, Embercast, Tubbs Fire, where it's moving at 230 feet every 60 seconds. So that's a completely different scenario, but it's one that I think people should understand. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll just speak to the comprehensive plan. What I would say is we're not there yet. What we have been spending a lot of time the last several years is developing kind of some of the components to operationalizing evacuations and some of those issues and learning from the Tubbs Fire, the Camp Fire, Lahaina, the Carr Fire in Reading. The 2020 Labor Day event, the Alameda Fire, all those, like we learn from those and we're taking tidbits of that. The next piece is we need to develop some data around certain known challenge or, we want to reconcile our intuitive understanding of where our known challenges are and reconcile that with some data to make sure that we're putting our resources where it's most effective. That being said, the reality of it is we can't evacuate the city of Bend in a vacuum. You can't evacuate even a significant portion of the city of Bend in a vacuum. We can't evacuate Schuster Woods, which isn't in the city of Bend, in a vacuum. It's gonna impact, evacuating DRW is gonna impact the city, vice versa, it's gonna impact outside the county. So we need to make sure that what we're doing this in unison as a community-wide. And so I think that's the other component. I think having a good teammate and a good team at the city of Bend that can help us, kind of get some of this work done over the next, period, a couple of years, probably. I'm excited to see where we can take it. So I'm probably not the answer you wanted to hear, but that's the truth that I can give you today. Yeah.
Thank you. If there is another question.
I live in Southeast Bend, right to the west of the Humane Society. And actually our neighbors lost their father and brother and mother in the fires of their Lions in Detroit. So even our valley, you can drive through and see it. So I'm sure you guys know that. I want to thank all of you for everything you do. I want to make sure, because I have a few questions. If I put in a confidential message to one of you, is it confidential for sure and neighbors will find out? It's half acres.
So, yes, to a potential extent, we do ask on our online portal when you're making a complaint if you want that information protected or not. There is an ORS that we do protect that information under. However, I cannot guarantee that people don't guess correctly where they come from, or if we do end up in court, that information could come out as well at some point in time, but generally speaking, we don't give that information out and we don't allude to things either.
So the east side of the checking, kind of been, you guys all do great, but the east side of it, so much more. A lot of half acre homes people have. They like to have their privacy and they keep Scotch broom up, that is completely dead. Yeah. And Scotch broom, and lots of homes, so there's Scotch broom.
We will be getting out there. If you want us to come to a certain area, make a complaint. We'll get out there sooner.
Folks, we have a lot of really great questions here. If you don't get your question answered, could you please email it to us and we will attempt to get your question answered. As I'm walking, I do have a question from the interwebs. New developments in Stevens Ridge are already installing wood attached fences in new dense housing areas. As these are known fire hazards, how can the city address this issue? I'll give you a minute to answer.
Great question. Right now, currently, we don't have anything in the development that restricts that, but that's one of the conversations with county as we look at what wildfire protections we can do. And then also, as we develop a new growth plan, there'll be conversations about policies in terms of materials, siting, fencing that we'll probably be addressing. So we need to get it into the development code so that it can be enforced. We understand the connection here. It's just trying to catch up to the code.
Hi, have we looked at what it would take to thoroughly harden the city, soup to nuts, and all the public lands, the right of ways, the getting into and supporting work by private homeowners, grants, and stepped up compliance? Is that $100 million bond project? It just seems like you can either pay for it in advance with prevention, or you're going to pay for it later when your whole town burns down.
Let me see if I can put this in perspective. The answer, the big answer, the answer is no. But I'm going to give you a couple of points just to give you commas and zeros. Between the recession and COVID, right, about a 10-year period, the city projects funded by us and some federal money, we built $1 billion worth of infrastructure in this town. In that 10 billion. It's $1 billion. Our 5-year CIP is about $500 million right now. That's for a town of 100,000 people. That just gives you a perspective of what you see out in the built environment now. So that it is not hundreds of millions of dollars. We would be talking billions and billions and billions of dollars to do some major retrofit. So that's, we don't have the number, but that's the scale of what we're talking.
Hey, Russ, can I just?
I do have another question from the interwebs.
Can I add to that?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I just want to say, if you are a member of an HOA too, I want to recognize the work that they do for us in the compliance aspect too. And they have, a lot of them have CCNRs that address vegetation and home hardening and whatnot. And those that are active get out there and they do that work for us. And we really appreciate that. So if you are part of an HOA too, you can start there, start small within your community, and do that work. And if you have folks that aren't cooperating, we can back you up.
Sorry, I'll also add, we work, the building code is out of the state. It's a state building code for the entire state. We are involved in that too, to talk about hardening and material types and things like that. Because that's, in terms of kind of the building code, is really where we need to get to make sure we get.
This question is for Julie Craig. For residents that wish to leave stems and leaves for pollinator habitat, what recommendations can you make that will allow habitat to remain and still be in compliance with fire codes? As president of Pollinator Pathway event, it has been our practice in teaching conservation to encourage folks to leave the leaves so there is winter habitat for pollinators. Many of those that overwinter in the stems and soil don't wake up or are laying eggs in debris that is now considered against the most recent fire codes. We talked with the city and directly with code enforcement and are hoping to get a more in-depth answer regarding maintaining habitat while not burning down the town. You think you can answer that in 2 minutes?
Well, I'm gonna point over here a little bit as well. Melissa just said, not within the 5 feet. Usually what we look at is if there's an area of vegetation that you're wanting to quail or bee habitat, whatever it is. We're gonna wanna look for a nice fuel break all the way around that area, keeping it away from the structures, keeping it away from poles, anything that could move into and ignite that structure.
Yeah, that's a great question. Wildlife and wildfire fuels mitigation can live hand in hand, absolutely. And so, great question about that came up. That first 5 feet is critical. We talked about that, right? So we can have those leaves, you can have those, but let's not have it within that first 5 feet. Same thing with bushes. If you say, I like my native bushes. Well, it's kind of up to us to not burn down their habitat, right? So we need to thin that out a little bit and we have to be responsible for their habitat as well.
Good job. Next question.
Question for Julie is, are there plans in the works to update the land home vegetation code to be more aligned with fire standards?
I would refer that over to our council member because we will enforce whatever the council asks. Good answer.
I mean, I think to Russ's point is that we need to be looking at a comprehensive set of practices. I think one of the things that's going to come up is, well, what's it cost and who pays, right? Especially for existing structures. And then there will be concerns about adding costs to the constructing a new one as well, given the affordability challenges that we face. But I think that this question of how we partner with the community seems really important to me. Everything I've read suggests that, and watched videos of suggests that home hardening is really important. So I do think we need to pay attention to it. And we have the most recently adopted goals that we have for our upcoming July 25 all the way through June of 2000, or I'm sorry, July 25 all the way through June of 2027. Wildfires more common than it's been in the past. So it's going to take some time to get there.
Another question from the audience. Raise their hand.
Straight behind you.
Hi, I guess this question is going to be for Melissa. Okay, I live in a neighborhood, an old neighborhood, and there are huge ponderosa pines. And it's interesting that you showed the picture of paradise where the ponderosa pines survived. And what I heard, and it's true, that ponderosas can actually act as a screen to catch embers, so they are a good thing.
I love this question so much. Okay, I think I have 2 minutes, right? So this, okay, here we go. Yes to that. Ponderosas are amazing, right? If you have a mature ponderosa right next to your house, we will never tell you to cut that thing down. What we will recommend is that you limb up those branches so they are 10 feet away from your eaves and roof. Ponderosas become more fire resistant every single year. Okay, another layer of bark, they become fire resistant, they provide shade. When embers land on a cooler property versus a hot property, those embers lose their energy. So we encourage trees, we want the trees. And yes, they can shield and protect from embers if they're healthy. So if we have healthy ponderosa trees in your yard, absolutely goes great. What's the caveat with that? Maintenance. The pine needles on the ground are what is going to carry that fire to your structure. So you can keep up on the maintenance of those pine needles. We encourage you to keep those trees healthy and just make sure they're lived up enough. Thank you. That's the question.
Awesome.
I love ponderosa trees until I bought a house in that town. I still love them, but it's just like,
On this legal line, we're talking about the safety of ponderosas. And yet developers are allowed to cut down healthy ponderosas and replace them with aspens because they're told they have to replace them with a tree. And we're kicking ourselves in the butt, basically. There's no tree code, or if there is, it's not enforced. And to allow builders to find this way to circumvent the law is only adding more danger to our city.
that's a great question. I kind of address that in a couple ways and then turn over to Council Riley to give you his thoughts. Couple things on the tree code. There is a new tree code that just got established to try to balance the preservation of trees. One of the things the city deals with, again, going back to what Brian was saying around growth plan, state law, state's telling us to densify. The state is telling, and if you look at our cost of housing and trying to find a market of a product that's livable, everything's getting smaller and tighter because the costs are so high. So when you talk about densifying, when you talk about trees, there's inherent tension. There's no, I worked for National Home Builder before I came here, and I can tell you that it just is one of the biggest struggles to try to figure out how to balance both of those things. Council took that seriously because of what was going on and what they were seeing in the community. There was a big task force that was created in the community to talk about this, and new regulations were put in place. And they're in place now to try to balance tree protection versus development needs versus housing, versus cost of housing, and needs, and all those things. The city's always in that black and white structure, trying to balance and referee and balance all these things. No plan is perfect, but there are codes on the book to try to protect trees as development occurs.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really hard to balance all that. I mean, we have to, and I think we need to provide more housing in our community, and in some places, we're gonna lose trees as a result of that. If we do lose trees, generally speaking, they have to be replaced. And, you know, the developers are not happy, the builders are not happy about the costs associated with that. We are gonna be reviewing the tree code sometime this summer or fall. After 1 year of implementation, we agreed to do that in the community and see how it was impacting development, but also to see how it was working in terms of actual following the code. I do want to be kind of fair to the developers and builders. There are a couple different pathways, and you can essentially cut the trees and replace them. I mean, that is allowed under the code, essentially. And there are probably many developments that people know of and have watched, and we're very upset about where everything was cut down. Many of those happened before we adopted the tree code, right? So in fairness to just, you know, where it started January this year, July last year, right? It's something like that.
Recent.
So yeah, it'll soon be about a year. We do have one developer in town that apparently refusing to follow at this point, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Just to be clear, in that set of circumstances, is that because somebody said they're not going to follow it, does not mean that they will be able to move through the process. They have to meet the rules, in order to get their permit. And so if they don't meet the rules, then probably not gonna get a permit. So, you've been reading about this in the media, but just know it has to move through the steps here before you can say whether it was followed or not, or we did our enforcement job. So I would encourage you to continue to talk to us, but it is a real challenge. I would like to see it develop in the community, and be denser here rather than sprawling really significantly. And the balance of that means that there are circumstances where we're going to have to make room for housing and plant new trees that will provide shade and beauty and all those other things down the road. When I first moved to my house, 2 little tiny trees out front that were maybe this tall, now they're literally 15 feet, and these are almost too much shade, to be honest. So, over time, things do come back and we get a different character over time.
Also, I'll just say thanks to the city council, we actually just started to do the forest coverage of the tree.
Okay, while I'm walking, I'm gonna talk, and I not trip up on myself. With so much uncertainty regarding the federal government and the national forest, what long-term solutions can Ben and the county implement to provide wildfire buffer? 2 minutes.
I may turn to Brian a little bit. I think regardless of what's going on at the federal level, currently, we are talking about this all the time, thinking about it. And it's already been in, so we start to develop the plan to the growth plan, and what do we want to be thinking about? That interface is always in the discussion of what we're doing. So I don't think we're relying on any direction from the federal government on what to do and what not to do. It's really a localized discussion in the tools that are available. And we will continue, as you determine where and how we're going to grow, that's one of the things that we're going to be really looking at, whether it's where we grow, it's the risk of where we grow, and what can we do to mitigate that through hardening or other policies. 2 minutes.
Hi, in reference to the trees that they're planting, just to get in a hard time because it gets hot. And they might want to look at, some trees and more adapted to the kind of heat there. And like on the lot there and land water.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we'll be evaluating, we continue to evaluate. So we have an approved tree list, okay. And that's one of those things that we will consistently look at to say what's working, what's not working, what do we want where, and those types of things. And especially when we start looking at street trees and everything, there are certain type of trees we want to make sure. So we'll continue to evaluate that as we develop the urban forestry program, and then also evaluate the tree code. But that list always kind of gets amended based off of kind of what we're seeing in the climate.
I have a corner property that is mostly xeriscaped now. I remove all cheatgrass and dead brush religiously. I have left some live brush and sagebrush, especially those outside the fence for deer to graze on the park. Do I have to remove the shrubs that are outside my fence between my property and the road? Is it my responsibility? And if so, can the city help with transport to the landfill? 2 minutes.
That's basically a yes. Property owners, adjacent property owners to the right of way are responsible for that right of way and the maintenance of that right of way. So if you have vegetation out there, you are responsible to mitigate that fuel as well.
Okay, but that was my question to me. I just clarify it. This is bitterbrush and sagebrush, and my deer love it. And it's not lovely, and it's not right next to the house. It's outside the fence. I'm happy to take care of it, but do I need to pull it? And I think it's been answered here tonight.
I don't think you need to pull it.
No,
It's
my
just
question's been
maintaining it.
answered, so I'm good. Thank you.
So I live out towards Sisters, and my homeowner's insurance was about ready to drop me for the fire hazard map.
I'll take this one.
And so I did my due diligence. I did my 5 feet of gravel, nice and sunburned, so just finished it yesterday. But yeah, you're talking about the citation, the $750 citation. Is there going to be like a enforcement moving in the future? So I mean, if you're asking us to do our part, I mean, I know how much.
You're not in the city limits.
No.
Okay, so we aren't enforcing outside. City of Bend is not enforcing outside of there, so I don't know what, county doesn't have a flammable vegetation code currently. And if you're not in sister city limits, would not apply to their codes.
I'll wait if there's another question.
We have time.
I just want to say one other thing, just on the insurance question. That is, I think that's a nationwide, community-wide question. The city doesn't have any direct impact on who gets insurance, how they get insurance, and the rules around that. All I can tell you is that in every level of conversations that I have, whether it's custodial cures or looking at large developments, the insurance question or affordable housing insurance question is becoming more and more a critical element of risk around developments. So I think this is more of a kind of state, national level conversation, because I don't think there's an area in the country that doesn't have some risk between hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, winter storms, drought. Right?
Can I have a minute?
Sure.
Thank you. So, okay, insurance, real quick. There's a lot of rumors out there, and one of my jobs is to look at social media and see what people are saying so that we can correct and fight damage control. One of the things is insurance. If your insurance is not going up and being dropped because of the fire hazard map, one thing there. It has nothing to do with that. The reason you guys are seeing increases or people dropping is because of our fires in 2020 on the west side. That was one of the worst years that we have ever seen in the state of Oregon, and everybody, the Division of Federal Regulations and all of them went, oh no, what do we do? We are now seeing that increase or drop because of those fires. So just to be clear, that map had nothing to do with insurance. They don't even like our map anyway. They are in the business of risk management, so they would not even go for a state Oregon map. So I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of that not having a correlation.
So happy to see that.
We have time for one more question.
Wait.
I have a question about the homeless, regarding the homeless, especially out of China map, that's on area management, land management, community. There's a horrendous threat of them creating a fire. So how is that being handled?
So the China hat, that's outside, the China hat also situations going on, that's outside of the city. Cities involved in conversations because there's basically a regionalized coordinated effort. I may turn over the mic, talk about this a little bit. But we're working within the county because the issues that we're having, you just can't say it's a city issue, it's a county issue, or it's a private issue, good issue, it's the region. And so there's a regional group that looks at all of this. We know that the Forest Service is moving forward with renewal in that area in May. We are also doing some relocations and closing some areas on the north part of town, up in Juniper Ridge. We also know that Redmond and around the area around the airport and BLM also looking at doing some things. It is a large regional question and quandary that we try to deal with every day, try to deal with the laws in which we can operate around it. But we understand that everything going down in China, that is, we're aware of it, we're coordinating with it, that is a force of us action.
I think the other problem, of course, is if the Forest Service is going to sweep everybody out there, right? Where are those folks going to go? Because we still don't have adequate shelters, we still don't have enough safe parking places, we don't have any kind of campsite that is outside of the temporary state area, which is up on the north end by Juniper Ridge. So people are going to show up somewhere else. So I don't mean to say that fire risk is not real down here and shouldn't be dealt with. If, in the Mike Bradley perfect world, I would love to have seen something more like the temporary state area, maybe approach down here where there was some people are allowed to be in a certain area and concentrate a little bit more where you could get more services to folks and therefore more able to help them move out of homelessness. That did not happen in that area, but they are going to show up somewhere else. So as a community, we need to continue to wrestle with where are we going to allow people to shelter? Where are we going to allow people to be in safe parking? How can we provide more of those services? And we're getting more support out of the state as a whole. But that's really just to keep the system we have alive, we have going that has stood up significantly over the last 4 or 5 years, just to fund the operations of that. It's not to expand it at this point. So there's a lot of challenges there. I think fire threats are real though. I have a friend who He's no longer with us. He had ALS, but he was living in the north end of town and he had to be rapidly evacuated. He was pretty much fully immobilized during one of the fires in the north end. It's very scary and it's real. But we're doing our best to address it. And I think we've done a pretty good working example of that with temporary safe city area, even though he's also not.
Perfect. Thank you so much to all of our panelists that came out tonight. Some really fantastic questions. We appreciate your participation very much. Old Farm District Neighborhood Association, we meet on the second Monday of every month here at this building in classroom A at 6:30. We also do our meetings hybrid, so you can catch us on Zoom and record them, and then we have on YouTube. So if you want to participate, you can do it that way. With that being said, I'm going to turn the mic over to Jim, Southeast Bend, you for Jim, and if we can have help putting the chairs up, that would be super great. Thank you all so much.
Great job.